Hello, everyone. Welcome to our panel discussion. We're kind of winding down. I'm sure everybody's had their afternoon coffee, pastelas de nata. Everybody's ready for what's going to be a very lively conversation. I hope you've all had a chance to walk the pavilions at Web Summit. It's really a remarkable display of innovations in wizardry and technology. I mean, there's fintech applications, new way to write software. We've got the big guys, IBM, AWS, Microsoft are all here with their wares. And as I was walking through the pavilions yesterday looking at this, one thing struck me was that there is no better or more crucial application of all of this wizardry that we see than in emerging economies, in developing economies, in bringing this technology to parts of the world that really need to make the great leap forward in their quality of life, in building businesses. So I'm so pleased that we are able to be here today and discuss this very important topic. And I'd like to begin with the basics and really kind of looking at, in this day and age, in 2017, what does an emerging economy mean? What is a developing economy now? How should we think about these developing nations? And Rebecca, if I may, I'd like to begin with you. Help us set a frame for our discussion.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. You know, the region I come from, Latin America, is the most unequal region in the world. Not the poorest, but the most unequal. Mm-hmm. And we are lagging behind in infrastructure, in innovation, in productivity. But what are our assets? Mm-hmm. We have the most educated population that we have ever had. We have the largest cohort of young people that are very well educated. We have women entering in big numbers to the labor market. And we have these new middle classes. For the first time, more Latin Americans are middle class than below the poverty line. So what are our real emerging markets? Youth, women, and the new middle classes. It's not about countries, it's about people. And what we need to harness is their talent. What we need to harness is how they can use technology to solve their problems and help society transform itself, including markets, including the economy. So these are the real emerging markets: women, young people, and the new middle classes.
Manuel, you specialize in going into post-conflict nations, nations that have been traumatized and are coming out of this and trying to get their footing again. I can't think of a place where technology may make an immediate impact more than in nations like that. Help us understand, when you go in, how do you start this process? How do you begin to use technology to help these nations get to recover?
Well, believe it or not, the beginning is actually the easiest part.
Okay.
Because, you have support of international organizations. It's pretty well defined what you have to do. Mm-hmm. These countries are going to receive international aid. They need to have the right tools in place so they can account for where they're investing the funds and what they're going to do. At the beginning, it's pretty easy. When it starts to become complex is when they have to start to develop their own identity again. And they have started to become their own countries, not based on the original funds that they receive from the international community. And that's when you get into these dynamics that Rebecca was mentioning about, which is the most important thing is people. People. How you train them, how you educate them, and how you make them part of a society again, because in a post-conflict situation, there's a big amount of trauma, and people have to learn how to function again. So education is the key word. Right?
Does your organization help with rebuilding infrastructure?
Yeah, we help with the soft part of infrastructure.
The soft part?
The soft part, which is the laws, the operational processes, the management, the development of the tools that are going to make sure that the infrastructure is going to be done on time, on budget.
So you have to
what
work
your
with
company is.
institutions in these countries.
That's correct, yes.
I see. I see. That sounds so challenging.
It is challenging, but, you know, working with people is the best thing you can do. You know, we're all good. And sometimes in life we have to just relearn it.
I see.
So, yeah, the investment is making sure that in these countries you really understand the country's culture. They, you know, you cannot. Okay, here's my counter compliment part to Rebecca, which is it's not about countries. I agree. It's about people. But I think because we have countries in these emerging countries, especially in post-conflicts, I would say the most important thing is do not do what developing countries have done.
Do not do what countries like the
United
U.S.,
States,
UK,
yeah.
the EU, China?
That's right.
No? Why not?
Because, you know, you have different resources, you have different challenges, you know, you have to go through different roads, you know, you have to go through a whole re-education. And so at the time you're doing that, technology, since we are here talking about technology, you know, the technologies appear at different times. We are here in the middle of the Web Summit. Right. Innovation is incredible. What you found here today, if you come to the Web Summit next year, some of the stuff that you saw here is already obsolete. So to know how to leverage which technology at the appropriate time when you're trying to rebuild a country is essential. Well,
Manish, as an investor, you look at different kinds of technologies. I mean, it's M-Pesa, which has become kind of a case study in what mobile banking can do for a society in Kenya. That's more than 10 years old now. Help us understand what you're looking. I mean, mobile clearly is still massive and probably still in its early stages, but help us understand the landscape as you see it. What other technologies are out there that look very promising to you in emerging economies?
Sure. I mean, so what I would say is that, you know, what is happening now in emerging market in terms of technology is just as profound as what telegraph and railroad did to the US in terms of the growth. And not only that, I mean, you always had the population. It's just that you couldn't reach to them. And that's what technology has done. So the huge amount of GDP growth you are seeing now, it is being delivered just because you can reach more people. Therefore, you are achieving the economies of scale and bring the cost of doing business down, and that is mushrooming into a big GDP growth. And you need a huge consumer base. So I like to say that if you go back and look in history, from the fall of Roman Empire to Middle Ages, not much innovation happened. If you look at UK, from 1300 to 1700, the GDP only doubled. Innovations don't happen every time, but there are phases through which you go through. So in the US, from 1876 to Second World War, the amount of changes you had was much more profound than what you're having now. I see emerging market going through that same phase, which is why you have seen China grow so fast. I would go as far as to say that what China is going to achieve, or it is achieving, likes of which we haven't seen for a long, long time. And by that I mean, look at the GDP per capita of China. It's $8,000, right? US is at $50,000. Even if you go from $8,000 GDP per capita to 12,000 and then to 15,000, which is the middle income, you have a huge amount, trillions of growth. So one should not be afraid about what is happening. There is a huge amount of growth coming forward. One should look at it very positively and engage with them and be part of that. And a lot of that will be achieved through technology. So in Western world, we have high street banks. In emerging market, why would you build a high street bank when you can achieve that through technology? And that's precisely what you are saying. You are seeing massive innovation in insurance sector. Insurance is at the heart of a developed economy, because that helps you do business, mitigate costs, bring the cost of capital down. So I see innovation in finance, innovation in insurance as a much bigger driver of growth. And you are already seeing that even in India. You see things like basic insurance, which Prime Minister Modi announced, has a huge amount of change. Crop insurance, farmer insurance. This is exactly how you're going to transform the world. So I see that we are at the beginning stage of a massive growth. So while we lack that growth in the developed world, you are getting that huge amount of growth going into emerging market. My final comment will be that, I mean, what is the difference between a 1% GDP growth, 2% and 3% GDP growth? At 1% GDP growth, you double your income in 73 years. At 2% in 43 years. At 3% in 30 years. Between 1% and 3%, there are two lost generations. So huge amount of GDP growth is absolutely important and massively important for everyone. And that's how you grow your productivity and make your people wealthier.
That sounds, it's like a whirlwind is what you're kind of describing. And I guess I would ask, how can institutions in these countries, especially in post-conflict countries, how can these institutions cope with such rapid change? Isn't it destabilizing to some degree?
Well, for sure there is a challenge that it poses to all of us. But let me connect that back to people, yes? Because precisely, if we look harder, there are thousands of initiatives. I am speaking for Latin America, okay? There are thousands of initiatives that are coming from the people that are trying to adapt and use this technology, develop these technologies for facing the challenges that their communities and their society have. And the problem is that they were initiatives that were isolated. So what we are doing as an institution is try to connect these thousands of initiatives so they will be networking, that they will be learning from each other. They will really potentiate what each other is doing. And we have mapped 31 cities with 4,500 initiatives that are trying to do that, bringing new solutions to society using technology, and 20,000 people that are working at one time trying to bring, solutions to their communities. And these are entrepreneurs, these are social innovators that if we are able to potentiate them, so you will bring the good part of technology to society and not the challenging or maybe shadows that technology may bring. I understand that there are two sides, but if people is able to bring the solutions to what they really need, and if we listen and we connect them, so we have a better chance of bringing technology for a more equitable world, and not only it won't stay only in the 1%, because that's a possibility.
Right.
So we need to do something about it, and it's possible because these things are happening on the ground.
That's very interesting. So you're really kind of mapping a network so that no one's working in isolation and they can start to feed off of each other. You want that network effect. But do any of you ever encounter resistance from traditional institutions, be they governments, government agencies, corporations inside these countries, to all of this rapid change?
Yeah, so, am I on? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Trust is critical.
Trust is critical.
Trust is critical.
Yeah.
Technology is an enabler of change, but trust is critical. So you need to develop change programs where you leverage technology and you gain the trust of the citizens in those countries. And you can achieve that through citizen engagement. Right? So let me give an example. Small country, East Timor, south of Indonesia, right?
Right.
Very small country. East Timor today, they have the budgeting system. So the budget gets approved in parliament, and the budget then is published on the web.
Okay.
And it's called the budget portal. And then you're going to see in real time, every time that has any commitment against that budget, any dollar that is spent, in real time, you can go and see how that money has been used. Okay, so you can see how that country is spending the funds against the budget.
So that the web is providing a lot of transparency then.
But what the country went further, and they said that we need to tie economic data with non-economic data. So they created something called a results-oriented portal. So let's give you a simple example. In the country budget, there was a bridge that was going to be built in a specific location, and you're going next week online and you see that they spend already 50% of the funds to build that bridge. Those have been accounted for. The citizens, they go and they take pictures of the progress of the bridge, they write reports, and they publish it back to the web. So now you can see on the government portal the budget, the execution against the budget, and the reality of what is happening. So what does that do is bringing citizen engagement, is bringing trust into the government that they are using technology the right way.
That's fascinating, fascinating project. So you really are bringing, what would we call that? I mean, I want to say it's like a supply chain, but you're basically showing the populace, here's how your revenue is working.
Yes, commitment account.
Okay, okay. We tend to talk about this in terms of delivering technology into emerging economies. Let's talk about the organic development of technology in these countries. Talk to me about what you're seeing in entrepreneurial communities in these countries. I mean, tech hubs we see them all over Europe now and so forth. Are we seeing the same in Latin America, for example?
Yeah, it's very interesting because precisely now that Emmanuel was talking about post-conflict, we organize these innovation labs, okay? And we choose the best ideas that are presented to us. And we ask in the region who wants to help to develop that idea. And so they help design and prototype these ideas. Many of them become very important and very successful and very entrepreneurial, or with great solutions for problems that were not properly solved before. So now we are going to the post-conflict area of Colombia. That's why I was so interested in hearing what you were saying. And one of the ideas is these people, Spaniard and Colombian, that are bringing 3D printers to do prosthetics.
Prosthetics?
Yes, because a large part of this population have gone into areas that have landmines. And so they have lost limbs. And these are thousands of people, victims of the war. And this technology, if they understand how to use it and develop it, will bring prosthetics that are 600 times cheaper than the ones they can find in the market.
600 times?
600 times cheaper. And this is an idea that is an open idea, that they want to bring this solution to the population. It can be hugely important.
How is a project like that funded?
Oh, that's a very good question. The idea, the design, etc., we found it.
Okay.
In this case, to develop it and to scale it up, that is really the problem. So the local government of Nariño, that is doing that in this case. But this is precisely one of the things that we are looking around here, to be able to bring a scaling up mechanism and much more connection between the impact investment and the foundations that are trying to invest in startups or new ideas, so we can connect these two. The ideas coming bottom up and the money coming top down. So this is precisely the challenge that we are facing now.
I see. Manish, do you see when you're looking at investing in the sector, what's the state of crowdfunding? We've seen how powerful crowdfunding has become in Europe and in the United States in terms of startup creation and just working capital for growth companies. What's happening on that front in emerging economies that you look at?
So, I mean, I would say that crowdfunding is not as big a deal in emerging market as it is in developed world, and I think there are reasons for it. But if you look at fundamentally, how important technology is for emerging markets. So if you look at MSCI Emerging Market Index, the technology had a weight of 10, 12% in 2007. Now it is at almost 25%. So technology has become, so you have far more companies coming into the market, delivering earnings, delivering growth, and therefore becoming even important. Now, look at China. I mean, Alibaba and Tencent has just changed China Just similarly, what happened with Google and Microsoft changing US, because what Alibaba has done is has spawned out 1,000 millionaires, who have money, who then go on to fund more businesses. So it's like a very massive multiplier effect, and that's what I see it as heart of how you can grow your economy, because ultimately you have to do it with capital, and it is not state-owned capital or state-run capital, private capital which can run, because that's how economies become a success. And China is showing that how they have done, and you are seeing that in India as well. And if you look at what China, Alibaba or Tencent, others have done, they have also brought about the best of Western technology and management and integrated that, which does not happen in state-owned companies. So, and that is at the heart of success that you are going to see. Of course, your impediments are going to be law and government and various other things, but at least this has set into motion. You have people who have achieved success, they want to achieve success, they are funding more businesses, risk appetite is high, and before you know, you have a giant machine which is working to make things happen. And that's what gets me excited about what is happening in emerging market.
I mean, the optimism that you're reflecting there and that trajectory, which is a fascinating story, is a powerful one. But are you worried, are any of you worried that, I mean, you mentioned the law and government. Are you worried that this could be derailed by the ancient problems that exist, such as corruption? I mean, we look at Brazil, and Brazil 10 years ago, so promising, and now it's still just recovering from a horrendous 2 years of scandal and political upheaval. Are you worried that this technological trajectory could be disrupted by these ancient problems?
I would say that, that's down to a nation, and the nations who don't get into the act will be left behind. And I say that,
so it's a
you are saying,
thing.
Yeah, so emerging market, when you say BRICS, BRICS is a complete misnomer, because China is way ahead. You have problems in South Africa, you have problems in Brazil. So these nicknames by itself is not going to deliver growth, and that is what we have seen. So it comes down to a nation. And I think that no matter what you do on innovation, your government and rules are going to be the impediments. And I like to compare that when you're farming, you can put the best of fertilizer, but the weeds are growing. You need to take the weeds out, and that is the role of a government, regulation, and other people to keep it clean. Otherwise, you keep putting on fertilizer, support government, but weeds are growing and you never have growth. So the nations that are going to take lessons from it, who genuinely want to grow and want to be a big power, they are going to grow. So you have cases of India and China doing very well and others falling behind, and they need to catch up.
And the East Timor scenario, to get back to that, it's a fascinating one. How did that come about? I mean, how did the government get on board with that?
When you're rebuilding, it's easier,
Yeah, there's urgency and
I think the important component that I would like to introduce here is that with innovation, with technology, comes a responsibility, right? I mean, at the opening of this summit, we were talking about that with artificial intelligence and what can we do with that. About it, artificial intelligence will be an important component in what we're talking about in emerging markets too. So, what is the mission that you have as an organization, as an investor, as a government, your mission, and how you leverage technology to achieve that mission? That's the most important thing. So, in my case, our priority is to achieve good governance, is to provide the systems, the education, the tools, so countries can achieve good governance, they can achieve accountability, they can achieve transparency, so we avoid situations like the ones in Brazil.
Okay.
So, but like everything in life, you can use technology both ways, right? So, and I think that's an important point that we need to debate here, is to say, what are the regulatory environments in those countries for the development and the leverage of these technologies?
Okay.
Right? I mean, if you try to put a e-procurement system in an emerging market country post-conflict, probably there is no law for it. And you probably
A procurement system. Yeah.
So you probably should do that about other types of technology too. At least from the point of view that you arrive to some type of framework, some platform that gives you some credibility, some stabilization, some accountability, and you avoid situations like the one
Okay.
refer to in Brazil.
Okay. Rebecca?
Yeah, I think that with this rapid change that we are experiencing, we are in a case that we studied before in development. That is that society and the economy go faster than institutions.
Yes. Yes.
And so in Latin America, we see that. And in Brazil, we see that. We see that with the new technologies and the new middle classes and the young people, they are less tolerant to corruption and inequality. And these are good things. So the big question is if they will be able to push institutions really to change.
That is a big story.
And be able to meet that challenge. That's what they want.
Right.
But it's true that in the meantime, there is lack of trust in the basic democratic institutions, in the government, in the parliament, in the judiciary. And that lack of trust and polarization can make it go other way. So what is it that we have to do for institutions to be able, and the political system, to be able to meet the challenge? And part of it is open up. You have to dialogue with the citizens. It's not for them to take decisions. I am not a populist. If you are elected, you have the representation to take decisions.
Right.
But you have to listen. There are much more ways today to be able to open up and listen to the innovations and solutions that people are bringing to you in a much more proactive and positive way. And I think that we will have to learn to do that much more and be able to change our institutions and our political systems to meet the new demands of the middle class of Latin America.
And I presume that when you say a dialogue, you mean more than just tweeting.
Exactly. No, tweets have been very bad, because at the end, you read only the tweets that do say whatever you already think.
Right.
And that is a problem.
Yeah, it's not really dialogue. It's more like shouting.
Exactly.
If I may just add a point.
Yes, of course.
We need to relook at the education systems. I think that's critical. We talked about people. We talked about providing people with the right tools. Society is changing, technology is changing, and we're maintaining the same education systems. And and they disaligned right now. We are rewarding, we are putting success ahead of well-being and happiness, as an example, right? So we say, if you're successful, you'll be happy, right? And it's the other way around. I mean, if you are happy, you'll be successful. But everything in life that we do is being, still in the whole way. So we need to relook at those things. So when our young people, as they don't accept the status quo, and they are the ones that are creating this change in these countries. Yeah. They need the right tools. They need to be re-educated.
Okay.
We need to relook at this. I mean, here at the summit is many speakers, and I've seen very successful athletes speaking about the disappointment that they had the day they achieved the record, because they thought that on that day they would be happy, and they actually realized that no, they should have prepared themselves, way before that, so when they have that record, then they could keep going. So I think our education system needs to relook at these things.
Okay.
Specific in emerging markets. And of course, I'm very biased because I'm talking about post-conflict countries and people that went through tremendous trauma, and they need to, rebuild their lives. So.
Okay. Very quickly, because we're running low on time, but I just wanted to ask each of you, if you had the magic wand and you had all of the funding and all of the resources that you needed to implement some kind of technological project or a particular type of software, whatever it may be, in an emerging economy, whether that be people or a nation, can you just highlight what it is specifically that you would do? Rebecca, why don't you start?
Yeah, but that's precisely what I don't want to do.
No?
No, Because precisely what we need to do is to listen to all the innovations that are out there, not to decide yourself what is the one that you want.
Okay.
Because precisely that is what will allow to create the ecosystem of innovation
So your
and transformation.
your innovation is listening,
It's harnessing.
harnessing. Okay.
Yeah. There is
right.
too much happening for you to decide that
Yeah.
this is the only way you want to
Okay.
go.
Okay. Manish, do you have an idea on this?
I would say that, I would like to see more technological involvement on the government side. Government is very reluctant in endorsing and accepting use of technology as much as we do in the private sector. And then you wonder that why private sector works so well and the government sector does not work very well. So you could use technology to do appraisal, to do procurement, to bring on transparency. I would like more use of that. I would like to see more movement between the private sector and the public sector and the private sector, so both sides. And I would like to see more of that encouragement and not a very silo-like development which a lot of markets suffer from. And therefore, there is no transfer of knowledge. Forget about technology.
Okay. And well, we'll finish with you. Education, which you've highlighted.
Some type of new global innovative university that could be leveraged across countries, that could help reshaping the new value system that we identifying in this new generation. And
Okay. Well, I think that's
invest
a very good note to end on. Will you join me in please thanking our panelists, Rebeca, Manish, and Manuel? Thank you so much.
Thank you.